going to do interest today, and recessions and depressions and inflation, but someone wants to say hi. Guest speaker.
Good luck.
Okay. I want to review interest real quick. I did this little handy dandy table if you want to add this in your notes. So paying interest is in the red. This is when you take a loan out. This is the way that banks make profit, because remember, banks are a private business. If they loan you money, they still need to be able to make money off of you. So paying interest, you are losing money in the negative. An example is a loan. On the opposite side, you can also earn interest, and this is when you put money in a savings account. So this would be an incentive for you to put money in a specific bank. Banks are going to offer you higher interest rates as an incentive to get you to use their bank. So again, if you, no, that's for a loan. Rude guest speaker. So that, if you want to add that to your notes, this will be a little easier way for you to remember. But now I want to go over what we did today. We went over a lot of government regulation today, how the government regulates our economy. We talked about monopolies. An example of a monopoly would be the EpiPen, right? There is no generic EpiPen. If you're allergic to something and you need an EpiPen, you're going to have to pay whatever that monopoly wants you to pay. So currently EpiPens are around $800, $900 some dollars, and you're going to have to pay for that in order for you to survive. And that's why our government, they don't like monopolies, and they actually try and pass legislation to block them. They could charge you an arm and a leg, and there's nothing we can do, especially with an EpiPen. You need that to survive. So monopoly has no competition. They're the only existing business that sells a specific product. So again, EpiPen is a good example of monopoly. Trust is when you get different businesses who decide to come together and form one monopoly. So there might have been 3 businesses that were competitors, but they're going to decide to come together and form a monopoly, cancel out their competition, and they're going to divide all the profits between them. So it went from 3 separate competitors to one monopoly. We also talked about different government regulation groups. The FCC, which is going to regulate the kind of media we watch, rated R, rated M for mature, on your video games, rated G, rated PG-13. That's all run by the FCC. You have the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, which obviously is trying to protect our environment. And then you have the FTC, Fair Trade. They're just, the government's making sure that there's fair trade within our country and outside of our country. International government regulation would be the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. This regulates free trade between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. We talked about how Donald Trump is not the biggest fan of that because we are not 3 equal economies going across the board. Mexico is benefiting more from this agreement than we are in Canada, which we talked about in class. So that sums up the beginning of our notes. That's something that you're just going to have to study on your own. What I want to go over, though, is what our government does depending on the economic cycle we are in. We have 2 different kind of cycles. We have inflation and we have recession. So I'm just going to write this out for you. I want to talk about inflation first. So inflation is when we have too much money going on in our economy. You guys learned about inflation last year with Germany post-World War II. Basically, the German government just started printing millions and millions and millions of dollars and giving it to the citizens. What the problem was is that the money was losing its value. So you might see a $20 bill, but the value behind the $20 bill might actually only be 50 cents to $1. So what we talked about in class is if you go to the grocery store with $20, but a loaf of bread costs $20, you're going to have no value for that $20. It went so far in Germany that a loaf of bread might have cost $2,000. If you have $1,000 cash and that can't even buy you bread, German people started burning the money to stay warm at night. We have inflation in the United States of America. In 2007, we had the housing bubble, which is a perfect example of inflation. Think of the word inflate. When you inflate a balloon, what's the balloon doing? It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's exactly what was happening in the housing market. People were going to banks to get pre-approved for loans that they really couldn't afford. They were going to the bank. Together they might have made $100,000 a year, but they're getting pre-approved for a mortgage for $800,000. Their mortgage per month was going to cost more than they were making in a month. But banks were still pre-approving them. So you have all these people who are buying houses they can't afford, and then all of a sudden it got so big and so tight that the bubble is going to pop. Months after people are buying these homes, they can't pay their mortgages off. What do you do when you can't pay your mortgage? You're going to have the mortgage lenders knocking on your door. You're going to have banks knocking on your door. Because remember, banks make profit off the interest off those mortgages. People were losing their homes. People were losing their jobs, which leads to why inflation and the government involvement. So we talked about these three different areas. When I talked to you about inflation, I talked about evil money. Because you have too much money going on in your economy. So you should have this written down in your notes. Evil money, too much money, floating around in your economy. We're not just going to throw money out. This is when our government gets involved, and relate that to a mixed economy. This is why we have our government involvement. If money is worthless, consumers are not going to go shopping. They're not going to go spend their money, and there's going to be no money for producers to buy more resources. So what's going to be happening to your circular flow? It's actually going to end up breaking in half, which is going to break the economy. There are three things that our government can do to pull that money out of the economy. First thing is increase taxes. If you make $20 a day and that money is inflated, I'm going to increase your taxes and I might take 20% of your $20. Why that? I mean, that doesn't seem like a big deal on $20, but if you're talking thousands of dollars, that's really going to affect how much you take home. But this is good when you're talking about inflation. The problem is you have too much money floating around to the point where in some countries they were burning that money. We're lucky in the fact that our economy's never gotten that bad. Our government's going to raise tax, and that is naturally going to be pulling money out of your paycheck. So again, inflation is a way for the government to pull that money out of the economy. The next way is increase borrowing, also known as bonds. So if you were here today, I'm not going to go over this example too much, but I talked about how my grandma 30 years ago put $10,000 in bonds. She invested that money. She gave that money to the bank, which in return gave it to the government to use right away. And the government gives you bonds back, which is basically an I'll owe you later. You give me the money up front, you take that bond and sit on it. My grandma gave it to us grandkids, and we all waited decades. And when I cashed that money in, instead of $1,000 bond, I actually took home $5,000 to $8,000. So that money earned interest over a couple decades. And this is the government's way of basically saying, thank you for giving me the money up front, and now you're going to get money. So the longer you wait on a bond, the better. You don't want to take a bond and then 2 years later cash it in. You might not make any money off of it. And the last one is decrease government spending. Decrease government spending means if we don't want to spend bad money, if we don't want to keep that money circulating, then the government isn't going to want to do that either. Instead of spending $2 billion on our military, which really isn't going to hold that value, we need to cut back on our money too. If we're pulling evil money from consumers' hands, we need to stop spending that evil money too. So let's go over inflation. Increased taxes and increased borrowing, these have a positive correlation and they pretty much work the same way. In taxes, the government's going to just take that money out of your paycheck. For borrowing, you're choosing to go to the bank, give them that bad money, that bad cash. In return, they're going to give you a bond. And then you're going to wait a very long time until you cash that bond in. So again, they took that evil money out. And then government spending, if we need to stop spending that money, our government's going to have to do the same thing. Once our government does this for multiple months on a time, that inflation is going to come back down, prices are going to come back down to normal, and everything will again reach equilibrium. Now, usually after inflation, we have a recession, a depression. We could talk about the Great Depression, and we could also talk about the 2007 bubble. After that bubble popped, people were out of jobs, people couldn't pay their bills, people were homeless, which is going to lead us to a recession. So we're at inflation, we had too much money going on, the economy was going out of control too fast. A recession is going to be the complete opposite. We are not going to be spending money and our economy is going to be moving way too slow. Again, think of your circular flow chart. If consumers don't have jobs, they're not going to be making money, which means they're not going to be spending it for the producers. If the producers aren't getting that money from consumers, they're not going to be able to produce, and in turn, your circle is going to be broken again. Complete opposite of inflation. Now we want consumers to have money. But what we learned about for inflation, we can't just print out money and give it to people. It's going to lose its value, which is going to lead us to exactly what we don't want, which is inflation. We need to find that normal middle. So in this case, you want to get consumers to spend money. You want consumers to go out and spend money. You want them to go shopping. You want them to make investments. You want them to use their money, because without consumers, you don't have producers. So in a depression, people are not working. They're not making money, which means that they're not spending money, which means businesses is going to create a domino effect. Businesses are not going to be able to survive without consumers. All those employees are going to lose their job. They're not going to have money to go spend at another business, so on and so forth. So there are, again, 3 things our government can do, the same 3 things, but opposite of inflation. So let's talk about taxes. Decrease taxes. Why are we going to decrease taxes? This is all about getting consumers to spend money. If your tax rate is 20% and I'm the government, I'm going to lower it to maybe 10% or 8%, so you're going to get a lot more money in your paycheck. You're going to be able to not only cover your bills now, but you might want to go shopping, want to spend more money, and that's going to stimulate the economy. It's going to bring that circle back into flow. Same thing with borrowing. Again, you have that positive correlation between taxes and borrowing. Why do we want to decrease borrowing? If you're going to come to the bank and you're going to say, oh, I want to give you my money for a bond, I might say no to you, because I want you to take that money and go spend it. I don't want you to give me the money and have you sit on a bond for 20 years. I want you to go take that money, go spend it, get the economy rolling. Now, the opposite is for government spending. And the perfect example of this is FDR after the Great Depression. So the Great Depression lasted pretty much a decade, and it was the darkest economic time in the United States. Again, that circular flow totally broke. Consumers were losing their jobs. They're not going to spend money, which means producers are going to lose their jobs, and everything is just falling apart. FDR came in and he said, we need to increase government spending. Whenever you increase government spending, you are basically creating new jobs in your economy. So you might want to add that next to increased government spending. FDR looked at our economy and he said, well, if people don't have jobs, we need to give them jobs. So he's going to increase spending because he's going to create jobs. He's going to tell men and women, you're going to go build a highway, you're going to go build a bridge, you're going to go work on this wall, you're going to get out there. Me, the government, I am going to pay you until we get that circle going again. So for a good couple years, FDR and the government, they were footing all these people's paychecks. What did they get in return though? People are going to work, they're going to get paid, they're going to take their money and they're going to go spend it at businesses. Now businesses have an income. Their businesses are going to take that money, produce more goods, pay their employees, and then you have your circular flow back. These are the two different kind of systems we have, inflation and recession. Okay? Basically, they're complete opposites. In inflation, you have too much money going on in your economy. Too much money is not good. Why? Because the money loses its value. $20 in inflation will not be worth $20. It might only be worth 10 cents, 50 cents, $1. Which means all your products are going to cost more money. Again, a loaf of bread might cost you $100. If you have $20 and you can't even buy bread, what are you going to do with it? Nothing. So how do we get rid of all that money that's floating around? Increase taxes, take it out of people's hands per paycheck. Borrowing, we're going to go to the bank, give the bank the money, get it out of our hands. We're going to get a bond that we're going to sit with for a couple decades. The bank is going to give that money to the government so they're in control of it, and we're going to decrease government spending. Okay, we have too much money going on. We're not going to add to that problem by spending more. On the opposite hand, we have a recession and a depression. This is when people are not spending money because there's not enough money going on in the economy. So we are going to decrease taxes. So if you do have a job, you're going to take home more money every paycheck because we're not going to take as much from the government. Borrowing and bonds. If you come to my bank and you want to invest in a bond, I'm probably going to say no. I want you to keep that money. I want you to go spend it and get the circular flow going. But I'm going to increase government spending. Millions of people don't have jobs. So it's going to be my job as the government to go create new jobs for you. Most of the time it's going to be infrastructure. It's going to be construction work to get you out. I'm going to pay you your paycheck until we get that circular flow going again. The last thing, I don't know if we added this in all the blocks. I think we did in first block. I don't think we did in second block. You need to add the 16th Amendment to your notes. And basically, the 16th Amendment is giving the government permission to tax our income. And I'm going to show you one of my pay stubs tomorrow because this tax percentage is extremely high and it basically takes the most money out of our taxes. You're going to have, or out of our paycheck. You're going to have a quiz on this tomorrow. Watch this video, go through the PowerPoint, go through the notes on Canvas. You're going to have to give me a short explanation on the difference between inflation and recession.